This is NEWSFASH, the podcast where fashion and news meet for your weekly dose of insider insights. I'm your host, fashion journalist Mosha Lundström Halbert, and together we're going to stay up to date and open to learn about fashion from a variety of perspectives. We're back at NEWSFASH, and I'm experimenting with a new format for the podcast where we're actually recording this as a TikTok live. I'm going to be going through the top news stories in fashion for the week and also taking your questions. So we're going to start off by diving straight in to the announcement that just came out about Adidas and Kanye West. If you will remember, way back in 2022, which seems like it was ages ago now, Kanye West and Adidas severed ties over it coming to light that Kanye West had been making a bunch of anti-Semitic remarks, both in the public, but also privately within the internal structures at Adidas. And this was really a quagmire because Yeezy was accounting for so much of the sales growth engine for Adidas. So they were really at a crossroads of how to deal with the situation. They severed ties with West in 2022, but the result was a number of lawsuits between the two respective parties. Well, it was announced this week by Adidas CEO Bjorn Gulden that they were both dropping all charges and had come to an out-of-court settlement that was not involving monetary compensation. So I think that my guess is that they both realized that the only winners in a situation like this were the lawyers, and they were much better off to just settle out of court and cut their losses. If you'd like for a more in-depth investigation into what West was accused of within the Adidas organization and how long running the reports of his anti-Semitism had been, you should check out a great piece that ran in the New York Times in 2023 that really acted as an expose. But in the end, Adidas was left with, in 2022, $1.3 billion of Yeezy inventory that they are trying to offload and have been trying to do so for the past 2 years. I'm not sure to great success. I don't know about you, but it seems like I don't see Yeezys very much anymore, and Sambas have definitely emerged as the dominant Adidas shoe. So if you're just joining us now, we are delving into the top 6 fashion news stories of the week. I'm recording this live also for the new season of NEWSFASH, the podcast. And please be thinking of and compiling any questions you might have about fashion, the industry, style, anything like that, as I will be taking them shortly as well. So in collaboration news, it's always so interesting to me how many of these collaborations come out and how little of them actually seem to have any rhyme and reason to them. Case in point is that Marni has collaborated on timepieces with G-Shock, the Casio-owned brand. And basically, what is a Marni Casio watch? What would that look like? Well, allow me to describe it to you. It's just white, and then in black and red said Marni all over it. And I guess that counts as a collab of some kind. Who is the customer and client for this? I don't know. I did notice when I was in Japan, and Casio is a Japanese brand, that Marni was popular and seemed to be well distributed there. I know they did their fashion show there a few seasons ago too, so maybe it was a play to that market at a more entry price point. And then thirdly, actually, go check out after this live and this episode is over. I have new coverage up about the latest Bottega Resort collection. Now, this collection just dropped yesterday. However, it's going to be reaching stores prior to the spring 2025 collection we just saw in Milan. And this collection was actually quite brilliant. I think it might have been my favorite of designer Mathieu Blazy's so far. There was just such an artful composition to all the looks. And I think he does such a really great job of always keeping at the forefront the fact that bags, handbags, and accessories are really the bread and butter of a brand like Bottega Veneta, but the clothes need to provide a contextual, artful backdrop for the bags to really pop and shine. Bags, just like on their own or with really plain clothes, don't offer such an exciting sales proposition. And for a brand like Bottega Veneta, I would wager that the sales of their apparel probably account for like 20%, probably even less than the overall sales for the brand. So they really don't need to be driving sales. They need to be perpetuating this ideal that the brand and the bags that they make are the epitome of desirable and luxurious. And I think they did that really, really well. There is such a through line between the bags and the clothes. Sometimes my criticism of like Nicolas Guesquier's work at Louis Vuitton is the bags don't always feel like they're directly tied in to the apparel, and sometimes they're even lost in how elaborate, experimental, and kind of sci-fi futuristic the apparel is. And I found with Bottega, you never lose sight of the fact that first and foremost, this is a bag brand, but you're never bored with the repetitiveness of the bags because the color combinations and the way things are styled, usually by stylist Alistair McKim, is just so gosh darn compelling. And there's always just these like quirky elements of interest, like the book, Richard Scarry's children's book, The World's Best Word Book. The cover art of that book was chopped into the intrecciato for a woven coat. So that woven signature leather that Bottega Veneta does is called intrecciato. Okay, we're going to take a break before we get on to the next fashion news stories to go through some of your questions right now. Thank you everyone so much who's joined us and who is chiming in with questions here. Okay. Oh, I have to say, this is very important to me. Someone has said, please delve into African fashion. Yes, that is on my list for upcoming coverage. As actually we're currently in the midst of Lagos Fashion Week right now in Nigeria. And Lagos has really emerged as kind of the fashion market capital for Africa, where a lot of designers, both from Nigeria, but also from South Africa and from Kenya, seem to show. It's an incredibly important market. And I will be covering that because I love seeing and understanding culture through the lens of various designers and what they're making in different regions. It's also an interesting time because we're also in the midst of Mexico City Fashion Week, which I will be covering, and some tricklings of Tokyo Fashion Week is coming in as well. So thank you for that. And that same commenter, Lethabo Living, noted that Rich Minisi and Tebe Magugu, I love Tebe Magugu, a South African designer and winner of the LVMH Fashion Prize previously, are designers that they wanted to bring to my attention. I actually own a gorgeous kind of caftan situation from Tebe Magugu that I wore to the 15% pledge black tie, black designer gala. It was so much fun. David Tiale is another one, King David's that they've mentioned. Thank you so much, Vicky James. I love being informed of designers from different regions that I can make sure that I am up to snuff on, because I really think it's important if you're somebody that, like me, I consider myself both a fashion professional, but always a student of fashion. And it would be very short-sighted of me to only be up to date on Western fashion designers. There's a whole burgeoning fashion scene that happens in other regions, and particularly of interest for me is African fashion and Brazilian fashion and Australian fashion, because oftentimes if they're existing in the Southern hemisphere, they're catering to a completely different type of clientele and seasonal structure. And so they have to develop a lot of their own like internal designers that are even made locally. And I find that really interesting. Oh, somebody else said Orally. Oh, let me get back to that. Orally doing a collab with Kith might be the worst thing I've seen in ages. Why would they do that? Interesting. Orally is a Japanese brand that is currently quite hyped about. And they're becoming quite known for their denim and their leather work. I actually hadn't seen their Kith collab. I imagine the intention behind that is to increase their brand awareness and presence in the North American market, and also tap into Kith's very streetwear savvy clientele. But I will have to check that out. Thank you for letting me know, because Orly is a brand that's certainly on my radar. Where are the sunglasses from? Obsessed. I get this in every video, every live, anything I ever do. They are the YSL mica. I have them in multiple sizes. There's a 53, which these are, and there's also the 55, which is a little bit bigger. They came tinted, and then I added a custom tint with my prescription and blue light as well. Can you talk about Latina? What do you mean specifically about Latina fashion? I have attended Mexico Fashion Week before. There's a number of Mexican Fashion designers that show during Mexican Fashion Week that are quite strong in the bridal department. For Vogue, a few years ago, I want to say in like 2017 or 18, I edited and produced a story called The Latina Cool Girls Guide to Mexico City, which you can check out, which also covered a number of the city and the region's top designers. And I loved doing that story and learning so much about the different designers there. Often, also the fact that what I found really interesting about the Mexican market is in fashion and also in food, it's very female dominated. Like the top designers and the top chefs are all women, or majority of them are women. And don't we wish we would see more of that in other regions? Somebody else said, you're one of my favorite creators. I honestly get so excited when you're on my FYP page. Thank you so much, everyone. The algorithm in the FYP page is a constant juggernaut to understand. So if you are someone that finds my content valuable, it is very important that you do all the things with the old money aesthetic. I mean, there certainly is. The thing is, if you ever are actually exposed to people who are really old money, oftentimes they're quite thrifty. They're not wearing the most expensive brands head to toe, and they'll have things in their wardrobe for a really long time. When money isn't like a novelty to you or something that's like a new experience, you probably don't have as much to prove, or don't have like as many gaps to fill in terms of leveling up your lifestyle. So I don't know. I kind of love the old money aesthetic that exists when you see people like really just wearing the same things over and over again, and having like a certain confidence and security that comes with that level of wealth. Like that's obviously, I think, the more enticing elements of that aesthetic trend that maybe we can glean from, even if we are not old money, not wealthy, or not nouveau riche either. Another question coming in here says, do you think the Margo will become superior to Birkin and Kelly? Can they compete with Hermes? No, there's no handbag or fashion brand on earth that is able to compete with Hermes when it comes to the desirability and the price cap, and also the client relationships that Hermes has cultivated. They are untouchable in that respect. There's other brands, obviously, that make amazing bags that people are going to love to acquire and collect. But in terms of retaining value and also just the same level of, I guess, prestige, there really is only Hermes. And I think other brands trying to price themselves accordingly to Hermes bags, because Hermes is actually quite conservative when it comes to their price increases. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a great, very long, very in-depth podcast called Acquired that did like a 4-hour episode on the history of the Hermes family. But they're quite conservative with these price increases. They don't like you. That's why you see Hermes bags selling for way more on the secondary market than they would at retail, because their whole value proposition, so much of it is tied to this idea of exclusivity and access, and the barriers for which customers have to jump through in order to get their products. Whereas a Margo bag from the row, for instance, while it's considered extremely covetable and obviously it's expensive, it's not as expensive as an Hermes bag, and anyone can purchase it, even if you don't have a purchase history, and you can buy it online. Like, they're way more accessible in that way. Somebody else said, I'm applying for fashion next year and you're on my portfolio. Wow, that's amazing. I can't wait to see it. If you can send me like a picture or a little tease of that, I'd love to see how I'm incorporated into your portfolio. And I'm very, very flattered. Thank you so much. Oh, this is a good question. Lonerism said, has fashion lost the importance of lookbooks? I'm so inspired by Phoebe Philo's styling, for example. Yes, you know, when I first started at magazines, we would get sent physical lookbooks almost daily. And that was a great way that you would flip through and you would literally like be like, oh, I'd like to see if we can get look 27 for this shoot. That doesn't happen so much anymore. A, it's expensive. B, the media landscape has changed so much and has been so truncated. And then C, I think if people are going to do lookbooks, they can just be expressed digitally. Sometimes I don't know, just as a journalist, what the difference is between a lookbook these days and like a presentation that's just shot and then featured on Vogue runway. But I still think like seeing looks styled and captured in a way that shows a point of view of the brand is incredibly helpful for contextualizing the pieces. Especially in today's day and age where like there's an e-com trend to show things shot just against a white background off figure, just kind of looking like they're like rumpled on the floor and then they take a shot of it. I find that very uninspiring. And I think it really helps to see things on models. Somebody else says, hey, Mosha, what do you like to wear as schlep clothes, if any? I'm actually wearing what I would consider schlep clothes today, which is a Uniqlo, that, what is it called? Not Heat Wave. Oh, I forgot the name. Heat Tech turtleneck that has a bit of cashmere woven into it by the Claire Waite Keller collection that she's doing. This, I think it's called C Plus for Uniqlo. This is also a Uniqlo little puffer vest because it's chilly in here. And then I'm wearing on de Mule Meester, kind of just like baggy white jeans. You can sort of see here. Just like a baggy white high-rise comfy denim. And then my shoes are, I'll show you them actually. They're quite good. They're vintage Chanel boots, suede boots. Aren't those fab? Got them on the Real, great find, and they were in good condition. Okay, more questions. Somebody else, things like subscribe, save, and comment so that you can train your little algorithm, your For You page to deliver you the NEWSFASH. Somebody else said it's surprising how African fashion is bought so much in Asia. I don't know if I find that surprising because there is so much Asian investment in Africa as well. It does seem like, you know, there's a lot of correlation back and forth between those two regions. Ooh, I love this question because this is something I've actually been thinking about a lot lately. Thoughts on mixing black and navy or black and brown? So I was thinking about this on my morning walk where I often get my best ideas. And there's a definite trend right now to mix blacks, browns, navies, oxblood, beige, and gray all together. And for me, I would describe that palette as very Milanese. If you've ever been to Milan, the way people dress there, especially like the very chic women of a certain age that are the hostesses with the mostesses, they don't wear a lot of black actually. And when I'm in Milan, like I feel that black looks a little bit harsh and stark. And as my friend who lives there has pointed out, that her mother-in-law told her, like, you're not in mourning, you can't wear black. These earthy tones, when worn all together, first of all, it offers you a completely different styling approach that you would have when you're wearing just all black, and black just automatically usually matches. Second of all, it allows you to play with a lot more nuance and rule breaking. And I think what we saw at Miu Miu, and then also with like the nostalgia for looks from Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, where she would mix a lot of like brown cords with black Calvin Klein, I think is really compelling right now. And it seems to be especially resonating with Gen Z, this idea of like textural shades of brown being an alternative to the harshness of black, which obviously I love black, but I think incorporating some neutrals often really works. The way that I do it, I have a pair of vintage Chanel riding boots that are black and brown, and I love mixing those into an all black look just to add some warmth. And I'll never forget when I first profiled Brunello Cucinelli, I want to say in like 2009 or 10. And I actually visited his village of Solomeo in Italy. And he was explaining to me how he doesn't believe in black and doesn't have black in his collections. And you'll notice if you ever go to Brunello Cucinelli's store, there is no black because he's really trying to reflect the landscape of Umbria, his region. And it's like rolling hills and forests, and it's very rural culture, and that countryside aesthetic he believes black doesn't factor into or belong in. And so it's kind of verboten from his look, which I love that. I love when designers limit themselves and have a kind of restriction upon their work, because I actually think it forces them to be more creative within those limitations. Take Stella McCartney, for instance, and her refusal to use any animal products. I think that is what has made her work differentiate and has given her longevity and made her stand out from the pack. Okay. Taking more questions here. I'm a newbie here, but I love fashion very much. Well, you are very welcome to be here. There's all levels of fashion knowledge here on NEWSFASH, from aficionado and industry professional to students and everything in between. Somebody else said, I'd literally fly to Milan just to see the chic street fashion. Yes, the two places in Europe that I would definitely recommend going to if people watching is your like favorite form of tourism, as it is one of mine, are one, Copenhagen. I was there this summer, and yeah, the people watching there is just so immaculate. And the people are just so gosh darn attractive. And I love how the influence of the cycling culture and bicycles to get to and fro influence the way that people dress in a way that they can be mobile and practical, but still there's this sense of whimsy and love of fashion. And then also you just really can't beat when it comes to polished, chic, elegant, everyday looks, the Milanese. Go to Milan and just stalk those streets and walk around and take in the people of all ages that have really mastered the art of a concept that in Italian they call sprezzatura. Sprezzatura, I believe. And that is the art of mixing something like casually elegant with something a bit sporty. Like even this vest that I'm wearing right now, that's like a puffer vest, wearing something like this, or like a Barber wax jacket with something a bit more elegant is the epitome of sprezzatura. And Brunello Cucinelli, Loro Piana, these sort of brands do that really well, and it's a delight to see it IRL on the streets in Milan. Oh, this is a good question. Thoughts on the Rose sample sale? How does it keep its identity now that it's become more popular? What is the identity of a sample sale? I think the last thing the row wants and needs is people making content about their sample sale for their own social media. I don't think the row has much to gain from that. I think it's a way that creators are able to show, an element of access and affluence, that they went to these sample sales and then engaged in these haul videos showing all the things that they bought. I think the row is trying to create more rarefied experiences, but of course it's hard to keep anything rarefied in the age of TikTok. And I think people are just so excited by the fact that they are able to get things that are priced at such a high price point for less. And it's something that other people would probably not have the time, money, or wherewithal to experience. So that's probably why our For You pages have been flooded with those videos. I don't know why I always get so many like Rose sample sale and Hermes trying to get my dream bag videos on my For You page because I don't actually find those terribly interesting, but hey. Okay. Thoughts on how Western fashion brands use cheap labor and overcharge their products. I think that this is something where brands are becoming more and more under scrutiny. And when you look at a brand like Brunello Cucinelli, who I keep mentioning, but it's relevant here, who is committed to making everything in a very small, condensed area where their workers are given like a gourmet chef made lunch every day and go home for a nap. And that, like, when you go there and you experience, or if you just read about what it's like to be a Brunello Cucinelli employee and how much it must cost to provide these programs that they do, it makes you understand why a cashmere sweater from them is, over 3,000 US dollars, and makes you understand like the value proposition. Whereas I think with a lot of brands these days, they're coming under scrutiny and it's really causing the consumer to question, hang on a second, if this isn't even made to the highest quality standards, if it's not a very unique, beautiful product that is going to stand the test of time, and if I can't be ensured that the workers have been fairly treated and compensated, why would I support this brand? If you're a conscious consumer, I do think it's very interesting too. There's a region in Italy called Prato, which is a manufacturing hub, but where cheap labor thrives and where there have been the equivalent of Chinese sweatshops set up in Prato, mainly employed by immigrant workers who are paid way below minimum wage and are enduring unfair workplace conditions as well, and what has been called like the equivalent of slave labor in Italy. So I think it's very important to look at the brands that you are supporting and see where they're made. Just because something's made in Italy doesn't necessarily always guarantee that the quality and value proposition is there, though it should. Okay. Somebody else says, I love when you do fashion news updates. It sounds like a fashion news channel on TV. Yes, I don't know if anyone else grew up watching shows like Fashion Television or also Fashion File as I did, but that's really how I educated myself growing up. And it's just really embedded in me, those shows, and also magazine speak. Like when I approach NEWSFASH, I want you to feel the way I felt watching those shows and reading magazines in the 90s and 2000s. Like you're being entertained and informed at the same time, and that we're having a conversation, and that I'm encouraging you to think about things independently and not just shoving my own like hot takes down your throat, but that it really is a conversation rooted in research and nuance. Somebody else says, black is always so chic, but brown looks way better on me as an anchoring color. Yeah, I think it's all about finding your ultimate mix. Like I also love black and navy together. I love gray worn with gold. Like I think it's part of the fun in discovering your style is finding combos that just really make you feel good. Oh, my little light keeps coming out here. Okay. Somebody else says, working on a physical fashion book archive. Any recommendations? Yes. If you want a juicy read that gets you a lot of information about a specific era and time and two legendary designers, I would recommend The Beautiful Fall by Deborah Ball, which is all about the rise and fall and rise again and rivalry between Karl Lagerfeld and Yves Saint Laurent throughout the 60s and 70s, with Paris playing the ultimate sexy, provocative, exciting backdrop. Okay, somebody else says, are you open to receiving products for private critiquing from up and coming designers? I don't know. I'm definitely open to looking at people's work digitally and offering feedback, or in person if it's in a place where I am local to. But I don't know if you necessarily need to send me pieces in order for me to do so. But yes, if you'd like my feedback, I'm more than happy to provide it. Shoot me a DM, or you can always email me at mosha@newsfashmedia.com. Keep these questions coming as I go through them, and then we're going to wrap up with 2 or 3 more of the week's top fashion news stories. Is the old money aesthetic valid or not, says Lethabo Living. I don't know if it's valid. It's definitely a catchphrase. Like a lot of these trends or catchphrases that I see pop off on TikTok, they remind me a lot of like headlines or subheads that we used to use a lot in the magazine world. Like I remember it bag was such a big one, or must have, or everything was a lot of things would be framed around that, to the point where sometimes your editor would be like, okay, stop with it bag, stop with must have. We've used this ad nauseum till it's lost all meaning. And I think probably the same equivalent has happened with the old money aesthetic. I mean, there certainly is. The thing is, if you ever are actually exposed to people who are really old money, oftentimes they're quite thrifty. They're not wearing the most expensive brands head to toe, and they'll have things in their wardrobe for a really long time. When money isn't like a novelty to you or something that's like a new experience, you probably don't have as much to prove or don't have like as many gaps to fill in terms of leveling up your lifestyle. So I don't know. I kind of love the old money aesthetic that exists when you see people like really just wearing the same things over and over again and having like a certain confidence and security that comes with that level of wealth. Like that's obviously, I think, the more enticing elements of that aesthetic trend that maybe we can glean from, even if we are not old money, not wealthy, or not nouveau riche either. Another question coming in here says, do you think the Margo will become superior to Birkin and Kelly? Can they compete with Hermes? No, there's no handbag or fashion brand on earth that is able to compete with Hermes when it comes to the desirability and the price cap, and also the client relationships that Hermes has cultivated. They are untouchable in that respect. There's other brands, obviously, that make amazing bags that people are going to love to acquire and collect. But in terms of retaining value and also just the same level of, I guess, prestige, there really is only Hermes. And I think other brands trying to price themselves accordingly to Hermes bags, because Hermes is actually uh, quite conservative when it comes to their price increases. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a great, very long, very in-depth podcast called Acquired that did like a 4-hour episode on the history of the Hermes family. But they're quite conservative with these price increases. They don't like you. That's why you see Hermes bags selling for way more on the secondary market than they would at retail, because their whole value proposition, so much of it is tied to this idea of exclusivity and access, and the barriers for which customers have to jump through in order to get their products. Whereas a Margo bag from the row, for instance, while it's considered extremely covetable and obviously it's expensive, it's not as expensive as an Hermes bag, and anyone can purchase it, even if you don't have a purchase history, and you can buy it online. Like they're way more accessible in that way. Somebody else said, I'm applying for fashion next year and you're on my portfolio. Wow, that's amazing. I can't wait to see it. If you can send me like a picture or a little tease of that, I'd love to see how I'm incorporated into your portfolio. And I'm very, very flattered. Thank you so much. Oh, this is a good question. Lonerism said, has fashion lost the importance of lookbooks? I'm so inspired by Phoebe Philo's styling, for example. Yes, when I first started at magazines, we would get sent physical lookbooks almost daily. And that was a great way that you would flip through and you would literally like be like, oh, I'd like to see if we can get look 27 for this shoot. That doesn't happen so much anymore. A, it's expensive. B, the media landscape has changed so much and has been so truncated. And then C, I think if people are going to do lookbooks, they can just be expressed digitally. Sometimes I don't know, just as a journalist, what the difference is between a lookbook these days and like a presentation that's just shot and then featured on Vogue runway. But I still think like seeing looks styled and captured in a way that shows a point of view of the brand is incredibly helpful for contextualizing the pieces. especially in today's day and age where like there's an e-com trend to show things shot just against a white background off figure, just kind of looking like they're like rumpled on the floor and then they take a shot of it. I find that very uninspiring. And I think it really helps to see things on models. Somebody else says, "Hey Mosha, what do you like to wear as schlep clothes, if any?" I'm actually wearing what I would consider schlep clothes today, which is a Uniqlo. That, what is it called? Not Heat Wave. Oh, I forgot the name. Heat Tech turtleneck that has a bit of cashmere woven into it by the Claire Waite Keller collection that she's doing. This, I think it's called C Plus for Uniqlo. This is also a Uniqlo little puffer vest because it's chilly in here. And then I'm wearing on de Müller kind of just like baggy white jeans. You can sort of see here, just like a baggy white high rise comfy denim. And then my shoes are, I'll show you them actually. They're quite good. They're vintage Chanel boots, suede boots. Aren't those fab? Got them on the Real, great find, and they were in good condition. Okay, more questions. Somebody else is commenting that they feel this like old money aesthetic. A lot of it comes from the Ralph Lauren world, and that was viewed as new money in the 90s. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I think Ralph Lauren was one of the original designers to look at world building in this way and take a look at like the aristocratic families of the US and particularly the UK, and how he could incorporate some of their everyday uniform and their ability to like mix and match different types of pieces into his collections and into his aesthetic. Thoughts on the Row's new Paris store? I think that's one of my favorite things that the Row does is create this interest around the in-store experience, and this idea that when you're there, I mean, I don't think we've seen this since like Phoebe Philo's Celine era. You're going to be inspired both from the art, the interior design, like any horticulture or plants that they're incorporating, but just it's very environmental, and it's not so much like a dry merchandising play. Like I love what Eddie Slanen did at Saint Laurent. I think it was really genius in terms of merchandising the pieces, but I did find that it made the store experience feel like incredibly cold and clinical and just like product. And what I think the Row does really well is they're wanting to create this like hybrid of a living home experience mixed with a retail experience, and have it feel like it's a real reflection of the aesthetic codes and choices and designers of different métiers, art, furniture, etc., that Mary-Kate and Ashley hold so dear. Okay. Somebody says, "Oh, girl, you are so impossibly chic. I see no schlep here beyond fabulous." Well, I do live in LA, so I do wear, my fair share of athleisure, and I do try to like, go on my hikes and go to my fitness classes as well. So you will see me around town in workout clothes a lot of the times too, which I probably don't change out of as quickly as I should. But I do try to like walk the talk and wear the clothes that are in my closet, and not just fall back on, schleppy work from home clothes as much as I can. Somebody else said, "Are Giuseppe Zanotti shoes dead? And what do you think of Louboutin's men's shoes?" I've interviewed Mr. Zanotti many times. Does anyone remember he used to collaborate with Kanye West a lot? In fact, when Kanye did his first fashion show, the boots were really the standard of that show. If you go back and look at it on Vogue Runway, they had these like strips of buckles going all the way down them. I think Giuseppe Zanotti is a genius. I think that his shoes are incredibly well made. The quality is very, very high. I don't think they're at the forefront of like what's happening in fashion right now, but I think he has a very loyal clientele. But I've looked at all these brands, especially in my past life when I was the fashion director at Footwear News, like Renee Calvia, who kind of had a comeback the past few years. Giuseppe Zanotti, of course, there's Jean Vito Rossi, there's Cassidy, and these are all family brands. these are very like Veneto, Milan based family heritage labels that just happen to make very sexy Swarovski embellished heels. And yeah, I love to support them. And I think that their quality is probably some of the best you're going to find on the market because they control it completely. Okay. Oh, there's a ton more questions here. I'm going to go through these quickly. Prep has existed in the Northeast/New England at least since the late 60s. Oh, I would go back even further than that. Yeah, I think there's so many areas of the US that aren't these main urban hubs, but that you can look at that are incredibly inspiring when it comes to capturing the essence of like what American fashion is. Certainly, like in my university years, I had some friends that were going to school in Boston, and I used to go visit there, and you would just see a certain type of New Englander when you'd be walking around Newbury Street or in the outskirts of Boston and New England with their like LL Bean duck boots and like cashmere cable knits. And I found the whole thing very compelling. Another question is, I also heard that Daniel Lee is going to Jill Sander, which makes perfect sense to me. Thoughts? I have not heard that yet, unless that just has broken while we've been on here. I don't know. I want Daniel Lee to stay at Burberry. I want that to continue. I like what he's doing there, and I just think they need to figure out the positioning and the price point and play around with more trenches. I want all the trenches, more and every type, and I want really playful ad campaigns again. And then I think they might be onto something. Also, because I live between the UK and LA, it's interesting because this whole barn jacket thing is such a trend right now. But in the English countryside where we have a house, you actually really need those barn jackets. They're so practical because they cut the wind, and that waxed cotton is waterproof. And they're not flashy, but they kind of connotate that, oh, you're a country bumpkin, but a bit more on the bougie side. And I just find them really fun to style. Like, I don't know if you saw, if you follow me on Instagram this summer, like I was putting vintage brooches all over my barber, and wearing it with like little gauny, like turned up leopard bucket hat. I'm pretty sure like the locals thought I was crazy. And my husband was like, you cannot wear leopard print in the countryside. Like you just really look like you're not from here. But hey, fish out of water. What can I say? And lonerism, agreed. It's ultimately indebted to British country attire. I love British country attire. Even if I don't even see people in British country attire as much as you'd like in the British countryside, I'm still rocking it. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite boots are my Le Chameau wellies, which are the wellies. Look it up. The royal family wears them too. They're the most comfortable and they just look the best. Okay. Somebody else says, I'm eyeing some Gianvito Rossi boots on the Real. Should I buy them? I'm going to say yes. If they're in good condition, yes. Or if you could get a cobbler to repair them. Gianvito Rossi makes really beautiful timeless shoes that I think like do a nice job of incorporating the trends without being slavishly so, and not relying heavily on like any logos or tricky hardware that's going to date. So I'm a fan. Okay. So, somebody said there's a great book called The Official Preppy Handbook for anyone interested in preppy style. Yes. Do you know what? I went to a luncheon at Kathy Griffin's house once, and the author, whose name I'm forgetting, but I'm on a group chat with her, of the Preppy Handbook, was there. She brought E. Jean Carroll, who was the guest of honor. And I just said to that woman, that author, I was like, that book was so definitive for me as somebody who was always really interested in preppy style, but wanted to kind of subvert it in my own way. But that is a great book. You should definitely check that out. Okay. So I'm going to, first off, I'm going to answer this one more question, and then we're going to delve into a few more fashion news stories. So the question is, can you tell us the story of how NEWSFASH was born? This is a great question. Thank you so much, Soph. Yes. So my best ideas always come to me when I am engaging in some kind of flow state. Oftentimes that involves a form of movement, be it exercising, be it swimming, be it just walking around. But that seems to like get my creative juices flowing and activate some kind of endorphins that allow me to tap into my creativity and ideate. So I was swimming at a beautiful hotel in Del Mar. And it was like a very classic hotel. And in the swimming pool, they had classical music when you would go underwater. And I'm a big swimmer. I love swimming laps. So I'm swimming along, listening to classical music, and just that like sensorial experience of being submerged in water and hearing the music. I started to just feel like, oh my gosh, I have this idea. I have this idea. And it came before me as a vision. I kid you not, newsflash while I was in the water. And it was really a combination of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, if you can believe it, and sportscasters that I often hear when I'll go to horse races that are commentating on the races, or when my dad has like sports on in the background. And then this 90s video fashion heyday that was so formative for me. And it all like crystallized together. I got out of the water. I went into my room. I blow dried my bangs, put on my glasses, and did my first newsflash. And I remember like one of the headlines was I was reporting on Lululemon's sales increase and beating their projections. And I think I said something along the lines of rich people still love Lululemon, despite, I said newsflash, rich people still love Lululemon, despite dog hair clinging to everything they make, blah, 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 blah. And then I went on to how their sales figures were going through the roof. And that really like struck, I think, the right note that I've wanted to continue to hit with newsflash, where I'm giving you serious, important information. But there's still like a sense of wit, hopefully, and humor to make it entertaining. And then we were just off to the races. And literally, I think I went to the horse races later that day, but I was like, my mind was just churning with how much I wanted to develop newsflash and how I thought there was a void. And it's been called WWD for Gen Z, which is so flattering, because I really am trying to bring that like industry insider perspective to new medias like TikTok and Instagram and podcasting. Would you consider yourself a journalist? Says Rian Avrupa. Oh, yes, I am a journalist. I'm a veteran journalist. I started my career at Fashion Television, and then I interned at Elle Canada as well. And then I went on to a magazine called Flair. And then when I first moved to New York, I was the associate fashion director for Lord & Taylor and Hudson's Bay Company, 2 heritage department stores. Then I joined WWD as the Footwear News fashion director. And then since I've gone freelance, I'm a contributing editor at Vogue.com. I'm a contributor to Vogue Scandinavia, the Financial Times How to Spend It section, the fashion correspondent for Q and Commotion, which are nationally broadcast radio shows for the CBC, which is like the BBC in Canada, but they also run on NPR. And I contribute to some other publications too. But yes, I definitely have earned my chops as a journalist. And I find it so rewarding now that I'm able to reach so many people through the power of these new medias. Okay, so now as we wrap up, I wanted to share with you 2 of the other top Fashion Week stories so that you can leave this little live, which again will be shared as a full episode on the new season of NEWSFASH, the podcast, shortly, with key information about the industry. And it's, good talking points for your next dinner party or social gathering. So it just came out this week, the Prada and Mumu. Prada owns Mumu. Mumu is like the sister brand sales. And Mumu is actually up 105%. So all that Mumu hype you're seeing online, it's not just hyperbolic. It really is the real deal. Like Mumu is crushing it right now. I believe Mumu only accounted for like less than 20% of Prada's overall sales, but still that kind of increase for a brand that's been around since like the 90s is very impressive. Prada sales are also up as well overall. And My Teresa just announced today that they have a new ski themed collab with Miu Miu, which I will definitely be checking out for a little après fashion fix. But I think it's interesting because Prada Group joins Hermes and Chanel in reporting for for Q4 sales increases for 2024 versus LVMH, which is the parent company of Louis Vuitton, Dior, Celine, Givenchy, Laura Piana, Fendi. Their sales actually went down about 5% for Q4. Oh, they own Tiffany as well. And Kering, which is kind of the rival luxury group, although they're much smaller, they own Gucci, Balenciaga, YSL, Bottega Veneta, Alexander McQueen, and Boucheron jewelry. They reported a very significant decrease. I think it was over 40%. And Gucci is really struggling. Gucci accounts for more than or nearly half of Kering's overall profits in the group. That's how big they are. But they did call out, and that's why I think it's interesting to have a look at the latest Bottega collection that is on my TikTok and Instagram right now, that the bright spots in terms of growth for Kering were Bottega Veneta. YSL is still a strong brand for the house, but it's slightly plateaued at the moment. And then, did you know that Kering also has a minority stake in Valentino, which is why it was so interesting when Alessandro Michele, who used to be the designer of Gucci, took on this role at Valentino. I actually thought he was going to jump ship and go to LVMH and join Fendi, but he is at Valentino. We've seen 2 collections from him now, a behemoth resort collection, which was called Avant Day Debut, I think it was, and then this this spring 2025 collection, excuse me, which just showed in Paris. And the resort collection has just hit stores. I just received notification from Dover Street Market, which is one of my favorite stores here in LA and globally, that Valentino's hitting their site and stores immediately. And I had a look at the collection, and it really is like super elegant, elevated versions of what Alessandro was doing at Gucci, but minus the kook and the quirk. It's a lot more elegant. But, I was doing a scroll the other day on the Reel for a skirt suit. Don't ask me why, but I wanted a little skirt suit situation. And I was coming across all these 80s Valentino skirt suits and little jackets. And you could really see the correlation when you look at Valentino from that like late 70s, early 80s era, before Valentino became so associated with like these very pure, elegant red carpet, often red gowns in the 90s, that in the 70s and the 80s, his work was quite like eleganza and frou-frou. And you really can see that in the work that Alessandro Michele is bringing to that house as well. And I think, Gucci is really struggling right now. A lot of people want to look at Sabato de Sarno and point fingers. An organization like this, it's so multi-tiered. It's not like they hire a creative director and he has complete creative power over all elements of like communications, visuals, or even product. And I think he is facing such an uphill battle right now because I just don't see Gucci as a brand. They have not maintained their desirability. And I think they're in a cooling off period. And this has happened several times with Gucci. I mean, go watch that slightly horrendous House of Gucci movie for proof of like the ups and downs that this very tumultuous family once owned brand at the time has encountered and endured. I mean, when Tom Ford took over, Gucci was like in the toilet, not considered cool, and had way over licensed their brand. And then again, when Alessandro Michele took over, like Frida Giannini had taken the brand in like a very diluted commercial direction that had made a lot of people lose interest in it. So they kind of just, that's part of the brand sort of DNA at this point, these ups and downs, and the fact that it'll be really hot again and then kind of crash, and then get really hot again and then kind of crash through these different impresarios, these larger than life personas, the Tom Fords, the Alessandro Michele's, that interject a new vision. But I don't know, if you look back at a lot of the Frida Giannini era pieces and campaigns, Sabato de Sarno's work is quite similar. So maybe it's just like Gucci has done the more quirky, whimsical thing for a bit with Alessandro Michele, and now they just want something that feels a lot more commercial and understandable for the client, but it doesn't really seem to be working now, does it? Okay, now to go through a few more questions as we wrap up this NEWSFASH live. I love this. This feels like it's like a call in, ask me anything fashion news radio show, doesn't it? I think we should start doing these weekly. Somebody said, I really like the new Gucci stuff. Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of really good pieces in there. I tried on the other day. They didn't have my size. These great chunky kind of Chelsea horsebit Gucci boots, which I really liked. I just think like overall, I don't see a really strong impetus to like make you go to the store or make you get Gucci over another house. I do think Sabato De Sarno's strength is evening wear, and I did love his second collection where he did a bunch of gowns with riding boots. I thought that was very chic. That was my favorite of his work. However, I just don't know that Gucci's where people go to for evening wear, especially with the direction that it had been taken over the past few years under Alessandra Michele. And like, I feel like I can't watch an episode of Guilty Pleasure, Real Housewives of, Salt Lake City or Beverly Hills or Orange County or New York without just seeing like way too much Gucci in the form of tracksuits and logoed sweaters. And I think that our eye has probably really fatigued from that kind of product. And it's no longer selling. And so they've gone in the complete other direction, but the market has yet to respond. Somebody else said, how are the new visual creative directors emerging in the industry? Is interning still in? I don't know if interning is still in, to be honest. I'm still a big proponent of interviewing. I just did an interview with a fashion student before I hopped on here who was interviewing me about my former intern, Christian Allaire, who then became my assistant, who now is a senior style writer at Vogue and kind of the preeminent voice covering Indigenous fashion. And he has a book coming out, and they were interviewing me about him and his career. And if he hadn't interned, he interned for me, and then he interned at Interview Magazine, he wouldn't be where he is today. So I think if you can figure out ways to swing an internship, you definitely should. And I think oftentimes now they're even like paid. They were never paid back in my day. Okay. And as we wrap this up, I'm looking at these last questions. Yorkdale versus South Coast Plaza. Which one wins? Oh, obviously Yorkdale. I mean, Yorkdale, I have to be loyal to because I'm Canadian originally. And Yorkdale has a Colonel's, which is my favorite place to get popcorn. And the store designs, you can really tell that brands have gone all out at Yorkdale. Like the Arc'teryx store facade had this whole like screen in the shape of a mountain. That was amazing. But South Coast Plaza is really nice. It just felt a bit more dated. And I think Yorkdale offers just more experiential retail and a great brand assortment. And I'm working with them now. So Yorkdale. For anyone that doesn't know, Yorkdale is like the preeminent sort of luxury shopping center in Canada. And I was just there last week doing an event with them where I was hosting a panel with a bunch of retail CEOs. Jem says, has Dior's profits been impacted by the investigation into the handbag production? I really don't think it helped. And I don't think Dior has had a bag that people are very excited about since the book bag and also the popularity of the saddle bag. And I think as their prices have continued to increase, if you're looking at getting a Dior bag for like over $6,000 nowadays, which is what, probably the median of their bag prices fall around, I think they definitely need to do some damage control when it comes to reputationally how people are viewing their quality and where their bags are made, because that story really went broad. I saw it everywhere. Marion says, in Germany, Gucci is at the moment the style of Talahoons. These young people are very proletarian. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. And I've never heard the expression Talahoons, and I'm very intrigued, and that was fun to say. And I would like to learn more. Are you still taking interns? Yeah, I had a summer intern actually who was amazing. Shout out to Charlotte if you're here. She's Gen A, like Alpha, and that was a really cool experience for me to work with a young person who was able to educate me on what was appealing to them and who were the movers and shakers in the cultural landscape that we ought to be covering on NEWSFASH. Any favorite spring 2025 collections? You know what? It was a season where I had more favorite pieces than favorite collections. That dress at McQueen, that crystal dress that was completely covering the model head to toe, like she was just had been soaked in crystals and cascading down her, was like one of the most exquisite looks all season and is really embedded in my brain. I loved some of the references to the work of Pierre Cardin and that like sci-fi couturier element at Prada. That really stood out to me. And then I thought Bottega was really fun to talk about and really brilliant. Celebration of like craft and the artisanal. So those really stood out to me. Oh my gosh, somebody said I was just in Soho shopping, and every time I bought something, I said, NEWSFASH. Thank you. I love that. I love you spreading the NEWSFASH gospel. And yeah, NEWSFASH goes where you go. Okay, somebody else said, when I interned, I was only paid in clothes and for the runway show. Yeah, that sometimes happens too. Well, you'll be paid in kind. Allison said, I'm a USC Annenberg grad student and I would love to work with you. Okay, Allison, definitely stay in touch. Another question, any magazines or written fashion media recommendation? I love How to Spend It, which comes out in the Financial Times on the weekends. I also love T magazine, which comes out in the New York Times, and any other fashion, obviously Vogue.com. I write for them, and they have so many fantastic writers and contributors there. And then, let's see, other fashion media that I would recommend you read. The work of Robin Gavon at the Washington Post. She's one of my favorite fashion journalists, so I would check that out. What advice would you give to young designers starting their brands? My advice would be very focused and don't try to do too many things at once. Do one thing very well, become known for it, and repeat it again and again and again so you can create a reputation and you can differentiate yourself and you can walk before you run. Are there any designers doing interesting things with denim that you'd recommend? Yeah, that Japanese designer Aura Lee, I think, is doing very interesting things with denim. I also love designers who work with denim, but it's not jeans per se, like it's actual apparel pieces. Because besides white denim, I don't wear a lot of jeans. So I really do hope that Sean McGurr at McQueen continues the tradition that Sarah Burton had, where she would always make like really cool denim jackets and dresses. And then I think Sakai, which is another Japanese designer, does a really good way of like incorporating denim elements into their very like mixed material pieces and jackets that I think is fun to check out. And yeah, you can oftentimes find really cool examples of denim being used in unconventional ways on the secondary market. Like I once wore a Chanel suit from the 1996 collection that was like denim, but a Chanel suit. Oh, it was so much fun. I wish designers would make more things like that. How often do you refresh your closet? Where did that question go? How often do you refresh your closet or sell items? Actually, that's so funny you ask, because I did so this week. I went to my local Crossroads in Pasadena and I sold a bunch of stuff. So if you're looking for some great pieces from everyone from Tibby to Veronica Beard and Nina Bing, a bunch of great contemporary designers, Ganni, it's not Gani, it's Ganni in terms of pronunciation of that Danish brand. Go check out the Crossroads in Pasadena, because I sold a bunch of stuff and it was great. It was a really good experience. And I just like that you get cash and it's just easy peasy done with. I've done the Real as well too, but after the Balenciaga controversy, how do you think they have recovered? Apparently store traffic is really down, but the thing that has been Balenciaga's saving grace is that city bag. It is so popular. Every Parisian woman wants one or is carrying one. And you do see it a lot in Europe. It's had this whole like Gen Z resurgence as well. So just like their motorcycle or city bag, that was originally designed by Nicolas Ghesquière around like 2004 is still very, 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 very hot. And I think that's what's allowing the brand to continue to be somewhat okay, but I don't think they're out of the water just yet. And I honestly don't think they'll ever be under Demna, but that's their choice. Who would you love to see at the upcoming Met Gala? Beyonce. I would love to see Beyonce. I'm currently at Santa Anita racetrack. I'm in my husband's office right now. And Beyonce came here for the California Crown race recently. And she was dressed in a way that I hope people use in reference for the upcoming dandy theme, Black Dandies of the Met Gala, because she was wearing this incredible skirt suit with this like Stephen Jones wide brim chapeau and this like cape over top. And it was in like a Prince of Wales check. And she just looked so refined and elegant, and I could immediately spot the Black Dandy influence. So that's, I think, a great reference. And I would love to see how she takes it even further for the Met Gala. Are your glasses prescription? My glasses look uncool and don't fit what I wear. Yes, these are prescription. It's the YSL mica for anyone wondering, because they look good on absolutely everyone, and I'm not going to gatekeep. Somebody said, have you read the book, The Beautiful Fall by Alicia Drake? Yes, thank you, because I realized I said The Beautiful Fall was by Deborah Ball, and that's incorrect. Deborah Ball is another writer I'm getting confused with. Alicia Drake wrote The Beautiful Fall, and I definitely recommend everyone pick that up. It's like such a juicy read. A lot of it is salacious and perhaps not even like substantiated, and quite gossipy about like YSL and Karl Lagerfeld's various affairs and liaisons, but I highly recommend you read it. What accessories do you have your eye on? Oh, there's a bag called not the trapeze, Parachute by Bottega Veneta that I saw this model who has modeled, what her name is? Angelica. I think she's like Australian, Brazilian. She was on my flight from London to New York. She's models for Schiaparelli. That's how I recognized her. And she had that bag, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good, because I have the Andiamo bag, and it's kind of like it, but it's a bit boxier, and I think it'd be a great travel bag. So I have my eye on that. Jem says you're such an encyclopedia of fashion knowledge, in awe of your brain. That is so kind. It's actually just a mess up here, swirling with so many different fashion thoughts that I just need to get out. So thanks to everyone who's tuned in and is listening to this and allowing me to have this terrific outlet. Okay, last questions. Do you think young brands should start big and leave a big impact with their debuts, or start small? Both. Start small, but have big ideas. Hopefully Gaga will be at the Met this year. Yes, fingers crossed. Always love a Lady Gaga appearance at the Met. Okay. Favorite somewhat affordable clothing brands. I think Anina Bing does a really good job at nice quality for fair prices and for good. A lot of her pieces are made out of really good material. You have to look though. Some pieces are better than others. Glenn says we need Grace Jones with this theme, the Black Dandies. Yes. Oh my gosh. We need all the Black icons there at the Met Gala, just doing it up. I'm just thinking of like how fabulous it would be to have Grace Jones there, and like Diana Ross, and oh my God, the list goes on. Also Dapper Dan. We need Dapper Dan. I honestly think Dapper Dan should have been like on one of the chairs. I think that was a miss. What advice do you have for fashion lovers who have a passion for both modeling and concept design? You can do both. I mean, oftentimes too, like female designers have to, in many ways, embody and model their clothes. But there's no reason why male designers can't do, or they-thems can't do the same as well. So I think understanding the industry from as many different perspectives as possible can only help you. Somebody said, I'm reading The Beautiful Fall right now and it's so good. What do you think is the contemporary YSL or Karl? I think that Daniel Roseberry has the potential to be the next Karl Lagerfeld, maybe even at Chanel. I think Anthony Vaccarello is definitely doing a pretty good job of
That wraps your NEWSFASH. I'm Mosha Lundström Halbert. Stick with me here and over on TikTok to stay up to date on all things fashion. If you have any questions or guest suggestions or feedback, please drop us a line at mosha@newsfashmedia.com.